I knew this was going to be a great chat, and it is. This is absolutely mind-blowing. So, Mr. Ben Cole, take it away. Today I'm going to be talking to Ben Cole. Hi, Ben.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. Well, the sun is shining and
It's a good start.
the world is a strange place again today, but
Yes.
we live with it. And
Yes.
as creators, we have to be adaptable,
Yes.
and that's the secret of success, as far as I'm concerned.
Excellent. So you got that in before my traditional first question, which is,
Yeah.
what do you do?
What do I do? Well, I see myself as a filmmaker, essentially. When I left school, I was pretty dyslexic. I got two O levels, one in art, and one, and by a miracle, I got English. But the only great thing I'd ever done was to walk on stage in a play and get a round of applause after my first scene. It was in a Shakespeare play, and I really took over the show. And you know what school plays are like. They're boring and everyone falls asleep. But no, I got the audience rocking and laughing, and I really played this really tetras old man, and I just came alive. And I was a pretty shy kid. I also lost my virginity at school to my art mistress, who was a photographer. So
Right. Okay.
somehow she was.
That is one of the best opening. So,
Well, she was 27. She was an art assistant. She was really into photography. We had a photography lab at the back of the biology lab. And I was really interested in photography. I had a dart room in my bathroom. And she said she would teach me a few techniques. So we got into the dart room, and she did. And I thought it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I mean, here's a grammar school full of 500 kids. I'm not academically very good, and she fancies me, and I'm like, that's the best qualification I thought I could ever get.
absolutely. So,
So obviously photography had a kind of strange attraction to me. And she was a really good photographer, so I learned my trade in with a red light in the background, of the darkroom.
well,
And so I really see myself as a well. Look, let me tell you this. At 7 years old, I woke up on my seventh birthday and I asked myself a question. There was a question in my head. What am I going to do with my life? And I said, travel around the world and experience as much life as possible. And I've done that. So I travel around the world, not so much anymore since COVID hit, but I film, I interview, my first big project was One Giant Leap, double Grammy nominated project of mixing musicians with backing tracks and then philosophy and all that. So, that launched me. But I was an actor for 20 years in the West End and big movies and all that sort of stuff, and I got fed up with that. It was a professional deformity of being a weirdo, of walking in a room trying to work out who you want me to be, and I wanted to be more authentic than that. I wanted to be an artist. I didn't want to be kind of, yes, next, no, you don't look right, next, oh, you got a big nose, next. It seemed so shallow, and there seemed to be 1,000 other actors who were getting better jobs than me. So basically, I'm an artist with a camera in my hand. And now I direct, I shoot, I edit, I do it all. It's a bit on One Giant Leap. Duncan Bridgman, who's one of the geniuses behind it, he went from music editing software straight into film editing software. It's the same thing. One is sound, one is vision and sound. And so that's what I do. I paint with pictures. I create flickering light on the wall, and people seem to like it.
Cool. That's a brilliant answer. Thank you. There's so many. There's so much symbology in the dark room with the red lights,
Isn't there?
I just think it's absolutely brilliant. I want to go back to this 7-year-old.
Yeah.
This is a recurring theme, I must say. Right? People who get a drum kit, somebody buys them a drum.
Yeah.
A snare drum, not just a kid's drum, a snare drum at the age of 5. Like, why? and then they become, as time goes on, they become sort of professional drummers and stuff like that, or the plastic guitar that's bought for the kid, at 3. And those things that could be sort of really remembered. Now, what I really liked about that is that at the age of 7, you must have had some philosophical thoughts before that, because to wake up and make a decision about life. And
yeah, I was a really deep kid. I was a twin.
Right.
We had the forest. Epping Forest was outside the back gate of the gardens, so it was a bit like Narnia. You had the city, and then you opened the back gate, and then there was this ancient forest.
Yeah.
And I used to trek into the forest with a rucksack on my back to my little island that had a tiny little moat around it, and the bush that I used to make camp in. And that to me was heaven. That was the animals around and all the nature. And that adventuring into the forest to me was kind of very untamed, the forest. And I used to go fishing, and it was just heaven for me. So yeah, I think I was more deep and more serious and more grown up when I was 7 than I am right now.
Well, that's really fascinating. You said that you were a twin. Was it twin brother, twin sister?
Yeah, twin brother, yeah.
Did he come with you, or you did that on your own?
Yeah, he come with me, but he wasn't interested in the packed lunch, the spare pair of clothes in the rucksack. He used to get a bit annoyed with me. He'd just say, "Let's just go," and then. Yeah, but it was really my place. When you're a twin, you're born in the womb with someone else, and then you arrive on Earth, and there's someone else there, and it's great creatively because you've got a companion to sort of collaborate with. But it's annoying. You never get time on your own. You don't know who you are without this other person around. And like Oliver and the Artful Dodger in the Oliver movie, he was a sort of cheeky kid that used to nick stuff and manipulate people. And I was Oliver, really. I was this sort of blonde. He was dark haired. He didn't look anything like me. We just looked exactly like those kids in that movie. And I was like, I was the opposite to him, and I liked that. I mean, some twins are exactly the same, and some twins polarize. So, but creatively, I mean, we used to go up to Blackpool, and we used to get all the kids in the street of my grandmother's street, and we used to devise summer plays and go around each garage of each kid and do the play to their parents. Wow. So we were highly creative as children, and I just wanted to be, I didn't want a normal job. My dad was an insurance broker. We used to go and play at being an insurance broker up in the loft and move papers around and go, Mr. Clark, what's he insured for? And it was boring. I wanted something. My mother had been to ballet school. She'd done a bit of acting, and she wanted us to be creative. And this is the 1960s when the liberation of the youth. It was a youth market. Young people could do anything they like. We wanted a party. We want to just wear wild clothes and take drugs and go to parties and have a wild time. And I grew up there, and I grew up just a bit too late. It was the 70s. I was a teenager. So I would wander around with a white Afghan coat and a carpet bag thinking, where have all the hippies gone? I want to be a hippie, and they've gone. They've turned into punks.
Yeah.
They've turned into angry, irritable, sort of Mohicans. So I went to drama school because I thought, well, the only thing I've ever done good at school is walk on the stage and get this applause. All the rest has been a bit naff. And I went there, and it was a method, serious. The drama centre is a really serious drama school, a bit like the Russian Grotowski method and all this sort of stuff. And I was a deep kid. I used to go to a Saturday morning drama class and want to do encounter groups. I was really interested in the human mind. My mother was a child psychologist. Yeah. She lectured in child psychology, so I was kind of interested in that. Certainly much more lent towards that. So creativity was about people for me. I from coming out my mother's womb, I had a person to compare myself with, and he was very different to me. So there was that interest in people. What makes you tick, And as I grew up, I realised that I was good at art. I was good at seeing the world through strange spectacles, and yeah, no, that was so. When I went to drama school, and I came out of drama school, and I was like, I really wanted to teach. I really wanted to pull out of people their gold, and I wasn't allowed to go and train to be a teacher. I had to become an actor first, so I did that. And I went around to all the theatres in England, and every theatre company I got involved with, they all shut down. Arts Council grants were being halved and halved and halved. And eventually I realised that I got a job in the West End in Jane Eyre, and that was a kind of ambition. But I realised as soon as you did the final bow at the end of the last performance, that was it. It was over, putting the set down. And what did you get for it? A couple of blue rinse old grannies in the audience who might remember you, some tyrannical directors that, would give you thousands of notes every night and tell you weren't good enough. There was sort of, I just got fed up with that. And I started going on the circuit as an actor, and I got used to kind of casting directors who are strange middle-aged women who have a sort of weird power over actors. They're treated like real slaves in the film industry. I need a dwarf who plays the violin, does a double backflip at the same time. Now off you go, get me in, and I want it by tomorrow. So that's how they treat actors. They sort of turn round and they want the power back. And my twin brother became a casting director over commercials, and he wanted his union ticket, and I got rung up by 4 of the top casting directors. He did, and said, if you apply for your union ticket, your twin brother will never work again. So I was blackmailed. He was blackmailed, and he rang me up and he said, what do I do? And I said, well, we're not going to listen to blackmail, are we? You've got to do what you want to do. And it was true. All of these casting directors were friends of my agent, and I was stumped. And I tried a few times. I did about 4 movies and all that. And eventually I realised that I was a creative. I was an artist. It didn't matter whether I was putting my ugly mug in front of the camera. I'd done everything I wanted to do. And this red light in the biology lab kept calling back to me, that kind of the seduction of actually being in control.
Yes.
As opposed to somebody else telling you what to do. So I started, and it was the invention of the digital video cameras. So before that, everyone had to do a film camera. It was a circus of people, and suddenly they brought out this digital Sony VX1 3-chip camera that was broadcast quality, and I was good technically. I could set up your VHS cassette recorder, no problem. I had a brilliant mind for computers. I I could see the flowing water down that route. And if it got blocked, I could see where else you could go,
Yeah.
how you could get round things.
Yeah.
In
That is the
fact,
thing, isn't it, about computer, digital technology. It is that type of thing where there's
yeah.
no, you do that, that doesn't work.
No, but it's flowing water, that the energy that goes down that
Exactly.
thing has to go somewhere. So if
Exactly.
it can't go there, where can it go? And where can I
Exactly.
get round this glitch in the matrix,
Yeah.
And in a way,
Well,
that's the
that's a really
creative.
interesting point, Ben, because analog stuff, there's something else goes on with that. It's like with tape, when you're dealing with recording tape,
Yeah.
you can sort of do stupid things with it, and it will do it. Whereas digital, you can't. It's like no.
It's 0 or 1.
Exactly.
Whereas analog was colourful
Exactly.
or not, or the fuzz in the background of the
Yeah.
sound was interesting, but
Yes.
in digital, no, it's just digital fuzz, and that's very interesting, because I would take a digital video camera, and I found someone who lived in Brighton that's created a box with a spinning ground glass plate, where you could put a cinema lens or a stills lens on the end of it, and it would look like a movie camera. It would have the same flickering grain because of this moving
Yeah.
glass, and it was a revelation to me, because I could get the look of film on it, and that kind of gave me a name. And if you see What About Me, the end of What About Me, which is the second One Giant Leap film, it starts to introduce itself towards the end of the film, because I start using that. And then I started getting creative editing, and I didn't want to do conventional. For me, being an artist or being a creative, I don't want to create stuff that's just formulaic. For me, the exciting thing is to innovate. And I suppose because of the life that I led, my parents sent me to a very strange boarding school when I was a kid, full of kids from broken up homes. Social
Where
work.
was it? Because that's another little thread that runs through this interview.
Is it?
The strange boarding school. Yeah, the boarding school experience.
Oh, well, I've just done a whole podcast with a mate about how to recover from the trauma of boarding school.
Oh, well, you say what it is, because then we can.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just, it was, I can't remember what it was, but I'll put a link on.
Yeah. Do that, because yeah.
But this boarding school was a mixed boarding school for 11-year-old kids to 18, but it had a great arts department, and I used to get together. I mean, imagine going to boarding school with a load of girls and a load of boys. So 7 kids and 7 girls got expelled because one night 7 kids from my dormitory, not me, unfortunately, but fortunately, tied their sheets together, went out the window, climbed down the window, broke into a chemist, nicked load of girls' makeup and shit, broke into a pub, got drunk, and then came back to school, broke into the dormitory of the girls at 1 year above them and got them pregnant. These are 12-year-old kids. This is how tough they were, how weird the school was.
Yes.
But I used to do performances where I would do a dance on stage with one of the girls from my year to Pink Floyd. I would do. But I'll tell you a very funny story. I was really bullied at this school because I was middle class, well spoken, and my parents were together. And I thought I could get back in with the school bullies because they came around the classroom and said, "We're having a party, a big school disco. Does anyone know a band?" And I put my hand up and went, "Yeah, my brother's in a band. He'll come and play." So they threatened me with life or death. This band better be good. So my brother turns up They put up their equipment. They've got what are those old amps with the valves in it, that, buzzes a bit
Yeah.
and whatever. And they plug everything into this one amp and they
Oh.
turn it full up. They play half their first number and the amp blows and the big smoke and then the curtains close. And I'm in trouble. So I spent most of my time at that, and I was only there for 2 years. Luckily, my parents then got divorced, which I didn't have time to tell anyone at the school because I think they would have stopped bullying me if my parents were divorced. And they brought me home. And by that stage, my reality as a little secluded middle-class kid from Essex had been shattered. I'd heard stories, I'd heard different realities from these weird kids, from these beaten up kids, from these traumatized kids, and from a different kind of life. So I'd had an adventure outside of the box that I'd been brought up in. And I would go to the roughest discos in Essex and I'd be fine. Because I knew what it was like. I had hypervigilance around me, and I was kind of creative. So I could dance well on the dance floor. I could, the first disco at the boarding school, all the boys lined up one side of the room, and all the girls on the other. And traditionally at the disco, no one would dance until the last number. Everyone would hang around trying to look cool. But my first disco in my first year, there was one guy dancing from the moment they put the music on, and that was me, in the middle of the dance hall, wondering why everyone wasn't dancing. So you can see why I was bullied. I was showing up those kids that didn't have any confidence. And I had this sovereign, innocent confidence, which I believe, and let's get back to this 7 years old and this 5 to 7 years old, I believe we're born with a creative sovereignty that is innocent. And the more creative we are, the more that other people can get jealous and bully us for it and be the predator of it.
Yes.
Because it's very threatening to some kids. This kid that has an imagination, has
Well, it's
a
threatening to
curiosity.
society.
Sorry?
I would say creativity is threatening to society.
Oh, totally. Totally. How do you control? I once talked to a philosopher who said the only way you can control democracy is by fear. Now, if you try and make a creative scared, he gets excited. Suddenly you can think outside the box. You meet that brick wall and the energy's got to go somewhere, a bit like computers, and you come around and you're fast with it and you have fun with it. So that's what I've done. I gave up the acting. It was a ludicrous profession unless you made it into become a megastar. And I remember I was on an Anthony Perkins 42nd remake of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, playing Anthony Perkins' sidekick. The punk in the background that gets him the prostitutes that he then murders on the streets. And I just done the final scene with 18 model prostitutes from the Hungarian model agency. I was in my late 20s. I had bleached blonde hair and I had all these pretty girls around me and I was a movie star as far as they were concerned. I kept asking them out because I was single and they all would run away from me. And on the last shot on the last day that they were involved with, everybody stands around and says, "Oh, we're losing the girls today." Everyone claps. They all ran around me with autograph books. And I suddenly thought, fuck, I might be a movie star here. And I went back into my caravan and I got my camera and I looked in the mirror and I just wanted to get the look on my face. And I had to slow the shutter speed down to get the light in there. And I took a series of photographs and I started laughing at myself hysterically. And I've got the series of photographs now. And what it looks is a sort of innocent 25-year-old guy just looking in the mirror. And then it turns into a monster.
So,
I saw the face, exactly. I saw the face of my own ego, and it was scary. And I talked to a lot of movie stars. I went out for one night with Mickey O'Rourke just before he collapsed, his career collapsed. And here's a shy, quite short, stocky guy who would meet his bouncers, pretend to be really drunk, with his arms around his bouncers. We go to the next club, we get in the door, and he turned to his bouncers and say, "See you at the next one, lads." They would wait outside, and he would be stone cold sober and go into the club, sit down. He'd have 15 seconds before somebody would recognize him, and sit down and go, "Hey, Mickey, you want to be my friend? Oh my God," And he'd have to get up off the seat because they'd ask him the same questions and it was really boring. And then walk and sit down somewhere else. And then 15 seconds later, somebody else. And I thought, this guy's hounded. He's not happy. Everybody wants to be a movie star. I want to be a movie star, but really, what's it like? I mean, I was in a quite a popular commercial on TV, and people would stop me in the supermarket and go, "You're that horrible guy on TV, aren't you? I hate you." And I'd think, well, hang on a minute. And I'd say, look, I'm an actor. I'm actually quite nice. And they wanted to see you as who they wanted to see you. They wanted to project all over you. And that was going to send me crazy. So stopping all that and stepping behind a camera and stepping as a creative artist was a relief to me, and I didn't have to be anything I wasn't, and I got that one giant leap, split up from my first wife, and I went to WOMAD, and I was literally sleeping on the floor of a mate of mine's, and I was really suffering because I was really sad, and I bumped into a couple of guys who asked me, the guy I was staying with, he said, "Will you come and film my band and I'll get you a free ticket?" And then the guys also in the band and one of the guys filming it had this project of traveling around the world, like 55 locations over 6 months, filming musicians with backing tracks. And, they gave me the job there and then because I met Jamie Cato, one of the directors, and who's from Faithless. And I didn't know who he was. I didn't know who Faithless was, so I wasn't really nervous when I met him. And he said, "Do you know how to work this camera?" And I said, yeah, I've taught street kids on the streets in Ethiopia how to use a camera. I can teach you. What do you want, 10 minute, 20 minute or half an hour? And he said, "Well, let's go for the 10 minute. And if I'm enjoying it, we'll do a bit more." And within 10 minutes, I told him I showed him how to work the camera. And he said, "Do you want a job?" And I was like, "Yeah, I just want to get out of the country because I'm going through divorce and I really, really don't want to be here right now." He said, "Right, you're hired." And I said, "Don't you want to see my work?" He said, "No, I never want to see your work unless it's for us." So we did a couple of test shoots, and I think if I'd been terrible on that, they would have dumped me. And off I went around the world. When I was 7, I wanted to travel around the world and experience as much life as possible. Here I was meeting Ramdas, I was meeting Sai Baba, I was meeting sadhus, I was meeting hobos, prostitutes, policemen. We were talking to prostitutes about politics, policemen about sex. We were talking to different people about it, and I was given complete license to do whatever I liked on the camera. So I was doing time lapses, like Koyaanisqatsi, Powerskatsi, those movies. And I had a little 3-chip digital camera, so I was shooting through glass balls. I was doing anything I fucking liked. 1,400 hours I shot for a 2-hour movie. And you know what? Chris Blackwell had given us free license to do what we liked. Just do a making of the album that Jamie and Duncan had actually devised. And actually it's 20 years anniversary, almost this month, since we launched it in August. And we delivered that film on a VHS tape to Portobello Film Festival, and it won. They'd never seen anything like it. It was wild. It was out of the box. We had, we traveled across Africa, across India, across America, across Brazil, up through Brazil. And to me, that was my dream come true. And in a way, that's what I've been doing since then. I was in the Congo with Bruce Parry. I've been out to Namibia, to the Bushmen, the sand Bushmen, and filmed 80 to 100-year-old healers in the desert, dancing around, shaking their bodies, doing medicine. I've been to Native American communities. I've hung out with shamans and all those sorts of stuff. So I've really, I tell you what, my advice to anyone listening is, if you've got a 6-year-old child, wait to his 7th birthday, wake him up in the morning and say, what are you going to do with your life? Be careful what you want, you're going to get.
Yes.
Because I tell you, my twin brother said, when I asked him, he said, I want £1 million. And he's now a multimillionaire in Hollywood, directing TV commercials, which is, he didn't want to make amazing films. He wanted to make £1 million. How do you make £1 million? You direct TV commercials.
That's amazing, isn't it? I would say that those early visions or perceptions that children have are, we don't take any notice of them.
No.
It's only in reflection that you go, well, that's weird. I mean, I'll give you a few of these.
Okay.
Lots of famous guitar players had plastic guitars that they would stand in front of the mirror and pretend they were playing at the age of 3 or 4, whatever, right? Or 7 or whatever. The only difference probably was the name on the headstock. Right. So I think John Etheridge had Hank Marvin, or certainly Gordon Giltrap had Hank Marvin on the headstock. Mine had Elvis. It was that type of thing. You look at it and you go, that's weird.
Yeah.
And the story of the same with the drummers who get the snare drum, or they were playing on pots and pans at the age of whatever. It's just, you think, well, that's already started. The river's already flowing, if you like. And
so the big question is, where does that come from? Are we born with it? Is it something that
it's like that. Was it James Hillman thing of this idea of the seed? The acorn. You're already that, and I think, well, yes, there must be something in that, because if you look at anything in nature, when it grows, it becomes the thing it is. But with us, of course, apart from being the human, what is being human? It's that question, isn't it?
Well, it has to be our creativity, because I don't see any. I've watched birds hanging in a tree in South Africa building the most extraordinary home, and then sitting there, and the female comes along and has one look at it and goes, nah, it's not very good, flies off, so starts making another one. I mean, that's creative.
Exactly.
It's not, this is functional, so let's have some babies. No. It's like, no, I don't quite like the way you weave that particular nest. So I'm not saying that it's essentially uniquely human to be creative, but we can look at ourselves and interpret. I mean, in a way, that's what I do. I travel around and I find something unique, and I film it so that it shows up. So it shows up as special. I spent 20 years filming some of the world's top gurus. And every time I filmed one of those gurus, I found out that actually there was a lot of showmanship in that. I'll tell you one story. I'm in a back room with Sai Baba. Right now, this is a man who has 4,000 people every morning. He's dead now, but 4,000 people every morning watching him walk to work and collect his post. And they hand him letters, and he magics up these gold watches or this vibhuti, which is this
Yeah, yeah.
powder,
Ash,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Ash, basically from the flowers that surround his house. And I'm there with Dana Gillespie, who's a blues
Yes,
diva,
yes.
and her band. She's a devotee of his.
Yeah, I've just interviewed her keyboard player.
Yes, I listened to it. Marvelous guy. And well, I'm there with him, and we're there for his 80th birthday. And there's like 1 million people in this stadium, and he arrives on his a chariot pulled by his elephant that's covered in silver. You know, I mean, it's extraordinary things, right? So we end up in a little room behind his meditation chamber, which is his office, and he's interviewing us. And I've got a video camera in my hand, right? So he goes into his back room for something, comes back out with his hand like this, and he sits down and he points to you, for instance, and says, "What is it you want?" And everyone looks at you. I wasn't looking at you. I was filming his hands because I've done magic tricks and I want to see where the fuck does he get this stuff from. So I see his hand like this and I see, okay. And then he goes, "Oh, look, there's a ring. Here's a gold ring for you. Now, what will you do?" So the idea, and he had a watch, and I could see it in his hand when he came out the room. And I'm filming his hand, and I'm shocked because, of course, these, Dana's a devotee, and I'm like, I don't know whether to show it to him. And the irony of this is, I'll tell you this. I got up one morning and I was trying to get a shot of him with his elephant, where we're opening up the big doors. And the night before I said, somebody had met me and said he's psychic, you know. And so I thought, well, I'll try this out. So I sat there in my little hotel room in the village, and I said, "Sai Baba, if you're listening to me, I just want a shot of you with your elephant. Just one shot of you today." Because we hadn't met him yet, and I was just desperate to get this. So we got up at dawn and we went off, and I went out my hotel room. I realised I'd left the plate to my camera in my hotel room. So I gave my tripod and my camera kit to the guys, and I ran up into my room, about 15 steps into my room, got the plate, came back out, and they'd gone. They disappeared. And we were supposed to be going to the place where he'd become enlightened, this sort of rock overlooking the valley. And I ran around the streets. I mean, I'm a fast runner. I'm very fit. And I couldn't find them. I mean, where had they gone? Had they sort of got a taxi or a tut-tut or something? And eventually I got up to there and we got the shots, and we came down and they were putting all these railings away. And I asked a guy, what's going on? And he said, "Oh, the elephant has come and gone." And I thought, bugger. And I stood in the middle of the road and I said, "All right, Sai Baba, I got your answer. You're not going to get it. You're going to let me get this shot." And I turn round and there is the elephant behind me.
Yeah.
And I got my shots of the elephant. And then as the elephant went towards, a whole crowd of people came, blocked my view, doors open, elephant went in, and I didn't get a shot of Sai Baba. And again I went, "All right, Sai Baba, all right. I didn't get my shot of you, you know, okay, so that's your answer." And I'm walking up the road, and out a side door opens, and a red BMW comes out and drives past me, and I film through the window, and I get one frame of Sai Baba sitting there like this,
Right.
looking right at me. And so I got that one frame. So my creative mind starts to play with this,
Yeah.
and I start to make a story up about it. And there were lots of very weird events that happened around that shoot. So I like stories. I like stories that say that things are not what they seem.
Exactly.
The best movies, the best stories, the best, podcasts are all about, well, I thought it was this, but
Yeah.
actually, guess what? It was completely different.
Yes. Um, yeah. I mean, you've just opened a whole range of things, I should say. This sort of the weirdness of stuff.
Yeah.
And of course, creativity is full of weirdness. It's almost like the whole theme of logic falls apart.
Yeah.
Logic is a map, really, to sort of explain the thing that happened that we can't really explain, just so we can navigate it a little bit, instead of it being the way that things work. If you see what I mean. That's where I've come to with this, because I've seen so much strange stuff where you're dealing with creative things where I use cut up for songwriting a lot, and I teach the sort of William S. Burroughs technique of just taking random things, and obviously we normally just do it with magazines and stuff like that because that's the easy one. But of course he was doing all sorts of things. Overheard conversations, things being said on TV or radio as you flip the channels and stuff like that. And I've done things where I've been, like a small festival like Into the Wild or something like that type of thing, but not that one, but there was one Kent I did. And I did doing this cut up thing, and I turned up in the sort of lunchtime, and we did it as the first afternoon session, and we got into just putting all these random bits of things from magazines that I brought along, and somebody went, it's very strange because this song seems to be talking about something we did this morning. And I wasn't there, right? So I said, what was that? And they just went through the lyrics, and it was all about whatever it was that happened in the morning session of whatever it was they were doing. And you go like, that is very odd. When I was talking to somebody, Dr. Al Cummings, who's a sort of a magician, but he's a doctor of medieval, books on magic and politics, and goodness knows what. It was an incredible guy. And he said, yeah, because he does a lot of stuff with cut up. And he said, I really like cut up when it starts talking about itself, right? How the process works. And of course, I thought, well, that's very interesting, because if you go to the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper album, which is pure cut up, even the cover, and of course the cover has actually got William S. Burroughs in the montage. And of course, A Day in the Life is 3 songs put together. And of course, Lennon's opening line tells you how the song was written. In other words, it was cut up talking about itself, which is, I read the news today. Oh boy. It's all about what was in the newspaper and in a film. That's his part. Yeah. And he thought, oh God, yeah, it's so when that weirdness comes out of the creative process, like you say, you're there, you're going to do something. I just want, one shot. Of, and it's like, you get
that's what
you get the one shot.
Be careful what you want. You might get to be specific.
So let's sort of pursue this, because if you spent time with shaman or sadhus and stuff, and you then get that weird thing where maybe you start dreaming about something later, or you get a dream that happened, maybe a year, 2 years before, that suddenly it all makes sense because you're now experiencing something that happened in a dream that was just like, it was a dream. There it is. You might, I've seen this like in my own experience. Have you had any sort of examples like that?
I'll tell you one. After I'd done One Giant Leap, I was approached by someone living in Forest Row who said she wanted to do one, and she was an ex-film clapper loader, and I said to her, "Well, do you have £1 million? Because that's what it cost." And she said, "I'm going to raise 3 million." And she is a very good producer, a lady called Nikki Williams. And she came up with this idea that we were going to go around the world and film philosophers and film native indigenous people. And for 14 years, she would ring me up and say, I've got more money, I've raised more money, we're off to Lake Titicaca, we're off to Native American place, we're off to South Africa, we're off to here. And we would travel off and we would do a film. And every time I asked her, what's the film about? She'd go, I've no idea, Ben. And I go, well, it's going to be a bit difficult to edit this film. We've been shooting for now 11 years. And I still haven't got a treatment off you. And if you want me to edit this film, and if you don't know what it's about, it's going to be really difficult. And she came to me, she was then ill for 3 years. And then she came to me and she said, I've got to edit it. I've got 180 hours that we filmed together and I've just got to edit it. So let's spend the winter doing it. And, oh, by the way, we got this medium who channels this entity called Tobias.
Right.
Right? And I was like, this is a bit beyond the hippie that I have in me. But anyway, fuck it. I'll do anything once. So we go and visit this guy and we sit down with him and he's got his bottle of Pepsi that he likes to drink while he's channeling and his wife. And we're doing it against green screen and he's pretty authentic, I mean, we recorded a few other women who would just sort of roll their eyes a bit and then speak in a weird accent and come up with sort of just out of the box philosophy that you could, a bit like reading your stars, it could apply to anyone. And all we said to the guy was, what's the film about? Because we've shot 180 hours and we have no idea. So if you could, from what your perspective or where you're sitting, he spoke for 90 minutes. He never made a blunder. No and ums, no trips over his words. It was a constant roll of consciousness, stream of consciousness that was specific. And guess what it was about? Now, this is, 8 or 9 years ago. And it was like, there's going to be a complete reset of society on this planet. It's going to present isolation. It's going to, all this stuff about the dark night of the soul, that you have to learn to breathe through it. And, it was pretty fucking amazing what he said. And we walked out of there going, well, we got what we asked for. And we went back to the studio, we started cutting it. And we realized that he had given us the voiceover guide to the whole series and that we could now edit it. And that this one speech that we cut 30 minutes out of it, but we were like reticent. And he had told us what the movie's about. And we got this, it's called Time of the Sixth Sun. And it's had over 600,000 people watch it on the internet. And it was not really that relevant until the pandemic hit. It was a bit like in the future, the weird things are going to happen and there's going to be a reset and we have to face it. But now, if you watch that movie,
Yeah,
it's the tool bag of how to survive
yeah,
the pandemic
yeah,
and what's going on and what's happening. And that is weird. That's spooky for me because I was so cynical towards it. So that's a kind of the big one. But I have loads of spooky stuff that, you know, the Celestine Prophecy I lent to my mother, who's a scientist, clinical psychologist and scientist. And she read that book. It's really badly written, but she got something out of it.
yeah.
And now when I speak to her, she's 88 now and she's suffering a bit from dementia, memory loss, but she remembers everything in that book. Carlos Castaneda. Do you ever read Carlos
Yeah.
Castaneda? Jesus Christ. I read that when I was 15 to 18. I
Yeah.
read all the books. I could not put it down.
Yeah.
Ask me what it's about. Well, it's about a guy who goes off and meets this shaman and takes a load of mescaline. You know, has some weird experiences. But I can remember all those books. I refer to it. It's like there are certain creative weird stuff that goes on in your life that goes to a particular part of the brain, almost the subconscious brain. I don't know if you've ever done shamanic drumming. My wife runs
Yeah.
a piece of work called Middle Earth Medicine,
Yes. Yes. I know.
and she does this shamanic drumming. And so you get into a little boat of your creative imagination and you go into your subconscious and you get to talk to it.
Yeah.
And if only we could talk to our subconscious, we just might understand what's going on. And there are, you know, wolves and lions and eagles and terrains, you know, and it's amazing what it tells you. It's amazing how it's so much better than the movies,
Yes.
you know, because it's about you.
Yes.
And it conjures up, it connects all the weird things that happens in my life and tells me what they mean. And I think for a creative, that landscape, you know, my twin brother has an amazing theory. He says the world is full of chaos. Okay? It's like, it's not a matrix, it's a ball of chaos. And our consciousness is born in that chaos. And we have an imaginative idea and we look into chaos and we see that idea because chaos is full of everything in the world. And we recognize that idea in chaos. And then a pattern starts to grow. And then a reality starts to grow. And as we change what we imagine, you know, look, the last thing I want to talk about is manifesting your highest, that kind of hippie shit. But actually there is, if you think of going out into the world of chaos, imagining something and it forming in front of you because chaos is full of everything, I get it. How useful is that? Well, that's kind of useful if you're sitting in a studio and your musical track is a mess and you don't know what to do. It's kind of interesting if I'm sitting in my edit suite and my film isn't working. Because I let go of trying to control it and I just stop, breathe, relax, and have some kind of faith that nature's going to show me what to happen. And suddenly I wake up the next morning, I've got this idea.
Yeah.
Where the fuck has that come from?
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. So the cut-up thing is that, I mean, it's chaos having random bits of information land on a page. And then when you read it back, things jump out at you. You start to see a pattern. And then you get that feeling that there is something that sits behind the things that are there. It's like there is a narrative and once you've got that, it creates itself, which is very, very similar to what you're saying.
Let me tell you a little experience of mine. I met a neuroscientist, sitting next to Daddy Janka, who used to be the head of the Brahma Kumaris, right? She's a mystic and a female mystic who's suffered a lot of pain in her life, but has seen through the smoke and the veil and understands something. I interviewed this guy who had been sitting opposite Daddy Jenka trying to prove whether things had a pattern or whether things were in chaos. And she eventually, after they'd argued and argued and argued, she held his hand and said, "Just look in my eyes." And after about 5 minutes, he broke the eye contact and said, "Well, I've no idea who won that competition." And she looked at the audience and everyone got it. And I interviewed him afterwards, and he explained to me that there is a part of the brain that makes up a story about something that we don't understand in order to remember it for the future. It's literally part of the imaginative part of the brain. So I go through a weird experience, I make up a story about it. And then later on, when I have that weird experience or something connected with that experience, the story comes back to me, because that's the only way we remember things we don't understand.
Exactly. So when you were talking about the chaos thing, I mean, obviously, if you listen, if you read the sort of Greek myths, it's all about that.
Yeah.
In fact, when you read them, you think, oh my God, if they'd got that nailed, which they did all that time ago, they obviously didn't make, they got that from somewhere else, Babylonians or whatever. We've always understood in a mythic sense how our consciousness is.
Okay, I'm going to tell you another story because this is fascinating. Okay, I'm hired by a interfaith minister who's been given a lot of money by a banker to start a college in this ex-monastery that he bought for £1.5 million and then decided he had to do something with it, to start a school for banking to learn integrity. Okay, and I think this is fucking great, man. So I go off and she says, "I want to make a film about the soul." And I went, hang on a minute. What's the soul look like? Well, what am I going to film? And she said, "No, we're going to go around and we're going to film with the influence of the soul." And she said to me, "Look, there's this revolution happening in Tahrir Square in Egypt at the moment. Would you like to go out there and talk to the people there?" And I was like, shit, the journalists have been banned. It's a bit dangerous to go with a camera into 4 million people in a roundabout in a big square in Cairo. But then the revolution ended. The prime minister was overthrown and there was kind of peace in that square, and people were sort of mingling with no government and discussing amongst themselves, writing on a banner, and then the interim government were coming down every Sunday with banners, and they would go around, find out what the intellectuals who'd met in the square had discussed, and then go and implement that during the week. And I thought, this is marvellous. This is the soul of the people talking after revolution. I've got to go there. So I go there, and I go into the square, and I meet this guy, and he tells me this story. He's a educated, middle-class guy who hated the government. So he had gone into the outer rim of the square. Now you imagine this square. It's a big round square with a small roundabout in the middle of it. Around the outside of the square are the police who serve the government and a whole load of criminals who've been let out of the prisons to create havoc. Outside of that are the army with tanks, who are the only country in the world whose constitution is that the army have to protect the people. So they were sitting around in their tanks, not fighting, but standing there in case the people were in trouble. Now, this guy told me this story. He had been fighting on the outskirts of the square with throwing rocks at the police. and these nail bombs that the police used to throw, which land on the ground, and all these small nail tacks fly out from them and cut your face. And you put your hands up to your face and there's loads of blood and it makes you run away. It doesn't really disable you that much, but it cuts you to pieces. And somebody turned around to him, and he was trying to get out of the square because his face was bleeding. And somebody said to him, no, you're going the wrong direction. Go into the middle of the square. Go to the roundabout. So he went to the roundabout. Now there's war going on around the square, but in the middle of the roundabout, it's like a tornado. Now what happens in the middle of a tornado? It's peace. It's quiet. And there's raging. And if you stood in the middle of a tornado and you stuck your arm out, you get caught and you get battered. And that's what this revolution in the square was happening. So he goes into the middle of the square where there is a kindergarten, a gig place for musicians, a restaurant handing out food, free food, and a hospital. And he turns up at the hospital with all this blood all over him, and he looks at the next guy being dealt with by the doctors, and it was the very policeman that he'd been throwing rocks at. And he walks up to this policeman and he goes, "What the fuck are you doing here?" And the policeman turns around to him and says, "I'm Egyptian, so are you." And he stood up and he gave this policeman a hug. And as far as his own consciousness was concerned, it was like a ball of golden light of joy connected his belly to the belly of the guy he was hugging. And this massive flash of light happened, which travelled throughout the square. And 20 minutes later, all the fighting stopped.
That's bizarre, isn't it?
And people were, 60 million people suddenly calmed down. An hour later, the Muslims were holding guard while the Christians were doing their prayers. And then the Christians got up and held hands and held guard while their Muslims did their prayers. It was suddenly, after that moment, everything changed. And I mean, I was in the middle of the square like a week later from all this, and I was interviewing people. The sparkle in their eyes was like nothing I'd ever seen. They were so alive, and I just felt at home. And yet, I had a guy who was a bomber, so he was a suicide bomber, with a bomb strapped to his back, who was willing to go anywhere everybody told him to, and everyone was looking after him. He'd obviously had psychosis. He was a mess. He had PTSD, but I was assigned a group of guys that were to look after me, because somebody said, BBC, you are British, BBC, come this way, and they hadn't had a journalist there for days. And I had an amazing time in that square. I didn't want to leave. Eventually a guy came up to me and said, "Look, there's a sniper up on the roof and we've seen him and you're in danger, so you should leave." And I immediately walked across the square, walked through the road, walked down the street. 5 streets away was my hotel. It was bizarre. So that kind of weird thing happens and changes the field of consciousness around a group of people. And that's what creatives do. There's a sensitivity to what's going on outside, on the other side of reality, that affects reality, and that's what we try and interpret. That's what all songs are. It's just energy that changes our perception of reality, and thank God for it, because otherwise it would be a very boring world, wouldn't it? If it was just zeros and ones.
Exactly. Because I've often sort of pondered the songs that sort of epitomize a period of time. And you look at that and you think, okay, so what comes first here? It's not quite as straightforward as that, but there's certain things that seem to ride the crest of a wave or predict something, and they're numerous. I mean, I often refer to obviously the Beatles and stuff like that. If you look at things like All You Need Is Love, and it's sort of just on that crest of that wave of that sort of Summer of Love thing, and you think, well, that's fascinating because they were writing that before that was happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you do. If you talk to the quantum physicists, they say time is, and you talk to Einstein, you say time is relative to where you're standing.
Yeah.
You go out into space for 10 years, you come back younger than somebody who's been on the planet. The cells.
And some of the theories about time, in the fact that time is the future is drawing the past to itself. Once you get your head around that, it's like.
Yeah, but if we don't try and get our head around that,
well, that's the thing.
Try and interpret that.
Exactly.
Then we're in trouble, aren't we?
You can't sort of go down the logical line. You just have to go, okay, that's what time seems to do.
Yeah.
That sort of, when you look at the world from that lens. So let's see about having the future be like this and see what then, what it does.
Because for me, the purpose of being a creative is to uncover what is not what it seems, so that we can then creativity becomes functional. It becomes, oh God, I thought it was this, and now it's not that.
Yeah.
So what could it be?
Exactly.
If we don't do that, we'll never get out of a pandemic. We'll never get out of political tyranny. We'll never get out of authoritarian.
Exactly. You'll never get your power back.
No. So if we can break the spell of the magician's curse, which is I don't know, or I'm not good enough, or
or there's an expert out there who knows the answer.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but I'm interested in the conspiracy theories. I don't believe them.
No.
But I don't also believe the scientists, because I know. Well, I'll go back to Daddy Jenkins said one thing at this conference, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. She said that it's no good understanding what is, because it limits it.
Yes.
Nature is constantly evolving, so we cannot think in a straight line.
No.
There's no such thing as a straight line. Alan Watts says the world is wiggly.
Yes.
It's not a straight line.
No.
If you have a straight line, it's boring. If you look at if you took the brain out of your head, it's not a case of long lines. It's all squiggly, wiggly lines going in different directions.
That's the thing of in sort of feng shui. There's no straight line in nature.
No.
Right? No. It's everything's sort of moving and twisting and all sorts of things. I mean, everything is in a constant state of movement. And again, this is what you look at this and you think, well, when are we actually really going to grasp that and go, you can't go, that's the answer to that. We can't do that.
And thank God for that, because otherwise, why would we need to live anymore on this planet once we've worked it all out?
Exactly. But we always think that some experts got that, and it's rubbish.
Well, no, and I get back to what Daddy Jenka was saying. She said that science has to build a machine to measure something, and you can't measure consciousness.
No.
They don't know where it is in the body.
Well, they
have no idea what it is, and yet it exists. So if we can't build a machine to measure it, so without it, science is terribly limited. And there's a organization called the Scientific and Medical Network of philosophers, Nobel Prize winning philosophers and scientists, who all have the same agreement that we have to start now using our consciousness to study consciousness, because we can't build a machine to study it. And science is extremely limited without consciousness. So we've got to try and find it. And the only people who have been studying consciousness, guess who they are? The people who invented the internet, which are acid-taking creative hippies, or musicians, or visual artists. And that's all we're doing really is tapping into the wiggliness of nature and getting the sap that drips from it. And then that is the medicine to get ourselves out of this 0 or 1, or that this is the truth. It's one of the things, the problems I have with politics, is that it's constantly defining that is law, that is the truth.
But then that sort of comes out of this sort of idea that this book holds the truth. That sort of Western thing,
that comes from the Bible, doesn't it? It comes from God. It must be. The guy who channeled for Time of the Sixth Sun, right, also channels a 2,000-year-old French aristocrat, right? And we were sitting there and we heard this amazing. We did this recording, and then he said, I've got this other guy coming through now, and the other guy came through and he said, don't listen to what that other guy said. It's a load of bullshit. I have arguments. And he came out with this arrogant ego that poo-pooed everything the other guy had said. And afterwards, I turned around to the guy who'd been channeling it. I said, I make the assumption that anyone who comes through from the dead or from another world must know the truth, because I'm sitting here in the illusion of being a human being. And yet your two guys disagreed with each other. What's all that about? He said, well, it's important, isn't it? Because otherwise we don't know. The whole point of wisdom, the first lily pad of wisdom is saying, I don't know. And if you've ever been working on a music track and you know what that guy should be playing, and then one afternoon you just jamming around and you go, oh, that's it. It was almost the opposite to what I thought it was, and that becomes the signature theme of the whole song. In One Giant Leap, we would get people to improvise, totally improvise. You get with an Indian musician, he can't play the same thing twice.
No, of course not.
He channels that anarchic energy, and they don't have notation. They just have memory. They just have a theme. The beginning of the day, the middle of the day, the afternoon sunset.
Exactly, and just after the rain.
Just after the rain, yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah,
well,
that was awesome.
Well, it's jamming. It's like verbal jamming with a musician. It's been a privilege.
Yeah, no, it's been wonderful. So,
great.
I'll put details in the show notes of your work. So if you send me some links and things.
www.bencolecinematographysite.com.
Right. Well, we'll get some stuff up, and I'll put a bit of blurb up about you.
Yeah, great.
It's fantastic. And I really recommend people check out your work, because it's really
it's ever evolving. It comes out of nowhere, and my work is all about nothing is what it seems.
Yeah, I can.
All right. Anyway, cheers, man. It's been a privilege and a pleasure. Thank you. Speak to you soon.
Bye.
So big thanks to Ben. It was great from the get-go, I thought. All the details are on the show notes. So if you go there, you can check out Ben's work. And obviously, if you want to help me do the stuff for this and the music charity, Icaro, and find out what interesting offers I've got on Patreon, follow the links. So there's lots of crazy stuff. You can learn how to songwrite and play the guitar, become a rock star or superstar or a songwriter or whatever, or just change the world. Simple things like that. It's all there. So until next time, see you then.